So
Great, thank you, Mary, and welcome everyone. When I was a young lad, I used to love the choose your own adventure stories. Do you remember those, where you at the bottom of the page, you'd have to choose whether you follow down the dark alley or you go to the park? So I'm going to try to allow you to choose our own adventure from a welcome perspective. I have a very serious and heartfelt welcome, and I have a funny welcome. So if you could do me a favor, we live in a democracy. If you could put in the chat either heartfelt or funny, and then just put send, and both funny, 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 funny. Okay, I think it's pretty clear what direction this group wants to go. I was recently at a statewide meeting downstate and was asked, how's it going? And my response, quite honestly, was, it's day by day. And I think I shared with some of you, so my name's Nick Sigler, Superintendent of Northwest Education Services, that's in 5 counties with 4 different health departments that all have their different way of approaching this pandemic. And so it seems like every day is something new and interesting as we try to navigate new rules and how we approach this. And so I came across this little video clip that I'd like to share because sometimes I feel like this is the world that we're living in. And I hope this comes through in that lighthearted manner, recognizing that we are still very much in the middle of a pandemic, but we do need to laugh. So let's try this. Can someone verbally tell me if you can see this video screen?
I can see.
Yes, Nick.
Okay, thank you.
They're off in the Christmas COVID handicap hurdle, and first to show is Omicron Lad. Omicron Lad being closely followed by the Booster. Omicron Lad in a bit of an early race here with each other, the Booster and Omicron Lad. Antigen test trying to get in there. Antigen test, Omicron Lad, the Booster. Track and Trace trying to get a look in, but he looks to be struggling early doors, I'm afraid. Track and Trace. Antigen test on the outside. Here comes HEPA filters. Being followed by the Booster. Omicron Lad, the Booster. Omicron Lad not giving an inch to the Booster. HEPA filters. Here comes New Year's Eve, absolutely cruising on the outside. Everybody talking about this one, New Year's Eve, looking confident and assured. The Booster, Omicron Lad, HEPA filters, Track and Trace is knackered, he's gone. New Year's Eve is coming fast. Sudden spike appears out of nowhere. Sudden spike, the big danger. New Year's Eve, the Booster plugging away gamely with Omicron Lad. New Year's Eve, sudden spike. Here comes Leave Them Kids Alone. Leave Them Kids Alone. Sudden spike, New Year's Eve, and a late challenge from It's Only a Cold. It's Only a Cold. Sudden spike, Leave Them Kids Alone. The Booster, 4th dose. Nobody saw this one coming. 4th dose out of nowhere. It's only a cold. 4th dose. It's only a cold. Leave them kids alone. 4th dose. It's only a cold. Oh, I have no idea how they're going to sort this one out, to be honest with you. They all crossed the line together. New Year's Eve just crossing the line now. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Lighten the mood a little bit. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to a great meeting.
Oh, I can hardly talk. Wow. Okay, well, on our agenda today, we have 2 big piles of work to do. And the first is going to be led by our friends from the Adjacency. I do want to let everyone know, Missy and I have had some conversation around this, and we have decided that we spend too much time sitting down in front of our computers, staring at Zoom screens and not moving for literally hours on end. So we are enacting a new policy effective today that no uninterrupted length of time shall go by without a 5-minute stop. So at 10:55, no matter what is happening, we're going to stop for 5 minutes and we're going to ask you to get up and stretch, get a drink of water, whatever, and then come back at exactly 11 o'clock and we will start up where we left off. So just so there's no surprises when suddenly everything stops at 10:55. Okay, Woody, are you ready?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to turn things over to the adjacency.
Cool. Finishing at the end where the thank you is, but let's get underway here. So thanks so much, Mary, and thanks to all of you for being here today. As is often the case with the Great Start Collaborative, you know, this is it's a tight group in that we work together day by day to address challenges and opportunities and the needs of young kids and their families throughout our region. But we also welcome new people all the time. And so I know that there are some folks that are joining us that have maybe are not that familiar with the process that we were engaged in toward the end of last year, toward the end of 2021, where we were really examining opportunities in the early care and learning system across our 5-county region and beyond, really, but you know, we're very focused on this region. And so when we talk about early care and learning, we are talking about preschool, we're talking about childcare, we're talking about experiences that kiddos have with their parents and their families. We're thinking rather holistically, but we recognize that there's, you know, a crisis right now, as you know, many people would call it a childcare crisis, but we think of it more broadly in the context of early care and learning. So we had a pretty in-depth process where we looked at other regions and solutions that they've come up with. We examined our own region and the needs and opportunities. We engaged with parents, we engaged with providers, we engaged with people throughout our communities to really think about, you know, what might we do to strengthen a system that was already challenged well before the pandemic ever hit. So that process was great. We ended up late in last year with 4 different solution pathways. I'm going to share them with you so that you can be reminded of what they were. We had a number of very specific ideas about what could happen to make a difference in our region. And now we're at the point where we can move forward with confidence into some action planning to have impact. So we presented this to the Great Start Collaborative. We presented this to the executive team. Nobody took significant issue with where we landed. It was a very collaborative process. So there are a handful of discussions that have happened since then at the level of the executive team. And, you know, as always, these are open for general discussion if we need to, but we think that this is going to be sort of a consensus point of view. The idea was that we don't need to launch a new initiative, for example, like the Grand Vision, where there's lots of fanfare, we create something brand new, new structure, new meetings. There was not much appetite for doing that around this work. The idea was that we feel like we are capable of helping to address the system and strengthen the system within the Great Start Collaborative. Now that may mean that we can create new structures, there can be different, we can invite new people in and community partners that are not, you know, are not in today's meeting, for example. But it's going to happen through the Great Start Collaborative. There was some additional discussion that I feel like might be slightly open about the potential to really focus on one work group. We have 4 solution pathways. We could create multiple work groups to work in each of those solution pathways. But I think there was a sense that there is so much of this is interrelated that quite possibly we might begin anyway with a group of people from the Great Start Collaborative and invited in from some key sectors that are important to getting this work done, who can put some extra time in to really work on launching some action items in some of our solution pathways. So that's the second discussion. And then the third, and this was just hot off the presses on Friday, we talked a lot about visualizations and how can we understand this work. And one of the topics that rose to the top was metrics for goal setting and for tracking progress so that we can communicate with the community. Where is it we're going in some measurable way, and how are we going to track progress as we get there? So as is the way with this collaborative, where you all have so much knowledge and so much commitment of what's really going on across our region, we need some of your input as we move into this action planning and into the creation of the structures to move this forward. So we're going to do 3 things today. I'm going to stop talking pretty soon. I'm going to start telling you about some of these exercises where we'll work together. The first thing we're going to do is add some detail and depth to the next steps. What are the things we will launch in 2022 that are going to help the early care and learning system in our region? The second thing we're going to do is collectively brainstorm work group participants. And those participants could be you, or they could be others that we can invite in from others who are not here with us today. And then we will discuss metrics to set goals and track progress. I think those are actually in slightly different order. We're going to do 1, then we're going to do 2, and then we're going to finish up with number 3. So first, we're going to review these 4 solution pathways. I'm telling you where we're going with this so that you can be paying attention to this as we kind of cover. As we review together, the ask is that you will choose 1 action item that you believe should be prioritized to address the needs of the early care and learning system. It could be something that seems, this is straightforward. It could be something that seems like this is hard, but in either case, it should be, this is something that we can do in our region that's going to make a positive impact on the system. The wording that I'm going to be sharing with you today comes directly out of the work that we did together, but this is a fluid process. We know that there is no plan that needs to be set in stone. We are constantly evolving. So if you see something that you understand slightly differently, we can, as you think about this and as you report out, you can change the wording slightly if you want to. So first on your own, and we'll give you about a minute to think, and then we're going to go into our first of 2 rounds of breakout groups. We'll ask you to answer the question, why did you choose that item? So of all of the different things that we could do in early care and learning, why is that the one that seems to be most important, or seems to be important enough that you spent your time on it? The second item is that what are some immediate next steps that can help make progress? And I'm asking you to be as specific as possible. So even if you think the solution is we need more money, I think we need to go 1 level down. Where's that money going to come from? How is that money going to be used? How is it we're going to begin this work of carrying this forward and having an impact on the system? And then finally, what else do we need to know to be effective? So don't do that first. Don't say, well, we need to know this, this, and this before I can even answer these questions. Do your best with the knowledge you have of where you feel like we should go next and what are some things that need to happen. And then say, well, it sure would be helpful to know this, that, and the other thing to be able to be even better at doing this task the next time. So you'll do that on your own. You'll think about it. You'll then have a chance to talk to 3 or 4 other people. You'll share out, and then we'll be reporting out to the full group. I'll touch on this again once we've looked at the solution pathways to see if there are any questions. Okay, so we had these 4 different solution pathways. And the first was directly related to the early care and learning workforce. So in our last of 3 meetings, we sort of talked about what's the next step that could make the biggest impact. And it was defined in one way, and there's been a slight wording change based on the conversations that have happened since then. It's really creating pathways to attract and financially support a diverse group of people to enter the profession and stay within the profession. So I'll show you what the specifics are on each of these on the next slide. The second was enhancing early care and learning private provider sustainability. So provide funding, provide resources, provide mentorship, provide support, provide all the things that can help launch and retain home-based providers in particular. It's not to say that we're excluding center-based providers and other private ECL operators, but that was the point of focus was on the center-based, was on the home-based. The third is expand regional ECL provider capacity. So the second one is more about each individual provider. What can we give them, that will cause this work to be more barrier-free than it is right now to operate a childcare. The third one is more about system-wide. What are the resources and assets that we can make for the whole system that will cause that system to be more successful? And that conversation focused a lot on the potential of shared services hubs and other types of hub facilities to provide resources that can be useful to all of us. And then the final one is building overall system support. And that was really about advocacy. It was about fund development. It was about reaching out to other partners in our community that have not traditionally seen early care and learning as their responsibility, but clearly are starting to recognize just how important this is to our communities, our regional economy, and our futures. So here's that next level of detail. I know it's a busy slide. I will just kind of tick through these things. But again, what you're trying to do is recognize the one that you think should be prioritized. It may not be the only one because these things are so interrelated, but it's the one that you're going to think about deeply, and say why this is important for us to really be working on right now, next steps, and then what else we need to know to move forward with confidence. So in that first one, expand the ECL workforce, create pathways to attract and financially support a diverse group of people to enter the profession. The big idea that came out of our third meeting was really sort of creating a full spectrum career pathway and declaring it and showing it, but thinking about where all the points of entry were. So high school parents who have had kids go through the system and now might be willing to consider working in the early care and learning system, retirees and second career folks, reaching out to new pools of people and defining the points of entry. Raising funds to pay for training and credentials. And there obviously are some ideas here that have to do with paying a living wage and providing support and benefits to people in the workforce, and then have an active approach to recruiting people. But some of the other ideas were train career tech center students as child development associates, subsidize a community minimum wage or a living wage for early care and learning workers, train local early care and learning workers from key communities. That idea being, we looked at examples from other communities where refugee folks were being recruited and trained to operate childcare within their communities as a way of starting their own business. Using community schools, tax base to increase early care and learning wages, prioritize affordable housing units for teachers. Our second solution pathway was enhance ECL private provider sustainability. The one idea that was prioritized by the group that discussed this, and the third of our meetings that we had, was provide funding and resources to help launch new home-based providers, very similar to the effort that's going on in Leelanau County right now, where there's an active approach to recruit, train, support new home-based providers. So it's recruitment, it's funds for facility investments that people need to make their facilities compliant. It's prep and coaching through the licensure process, support services that include billing, scheduling, back office support, and then mentorship. So that was kind of the one big idea, but some of the other ideas were subsidize providers serving families receiving CDC subsidies, fund training for home-based providers, compensate providers for incremental training and credentialing goals reached, and then provide substitute workers for home-based providers. Number 3, expand regional ECL provider capacity, where the big idea was about shared services hubs and connected schools, shared services hubs, 2 different models, but geared towards the same thing, where it's some sort of virtual or physical shared space. You provide assets that no one provider would be able to have on their own, and that can be a shared resource for the whole system. So some of the other ideas within that level of support were expanding cooperative childcare centers using volunteer parents, employers sponsoring on-site childcare, employers subsidizing childcare, property owners donating or subsidizing space, expand the Great Start Readiness Program in settings that address family needs, and then finally, expand the financial parameters for families that can qualify for state support, such as DHHS. So again, you're choosing one. We recognize that many of these things could have a positive impact on our system, but for today, we're choosing one to prioritize. And then the last bucket, build overall system support, that in some ways is needed and wraps up to all of these other solution pathways. And the one that was prioritized at the top of the list was get non-parents to care about the ECL crisis. There was some specific conversation around that. Engage people and create pathways to plug them in and support the work. You care about early childhood. What is it we're going to give people to do? Identify viable funding to subsidize early care and learning system, get public support that translates into funding through voting, raising visibility and appreciation for those who work in the early care and learning field, support the priorities of other work groups. Some other ideas were highlighting the true cost and return on investment of early care and learning, expand support network of parents and providers, government tax credits to ECL providers, increase consistency and reliability of state aid payments to providers, and then simplify licensure process for ECL providers through advocacy and legislative change. Okay, so that's a whole lot of stuff, and I apologize for me doing all that talking at you. But I wanted to kind of work through all of this so you could say, that's the one. That's the one that I think that we should prioritize, or that you personally are going to prioritize for your thinking today. So again, the request, and then I'll ask if there are any questions before we start to do this work, is that you select one of those action items, and I'll go back to that screen so you can look at it while you're thinking, that you believe should be prioritized to address the needs of the early care and learning system. You may reword it if you understand it in a slightly different way, or you think that I just want to express this slightly differently, that's fine. So first on your own, and we'll give you about a minute just to think before we throw you into a breakout room. Why did you pick that action item? Why does it matter? What are some immediate next steps that can help us make progress, trying to be as specific as possible? It may be you think of something that's within your span of control. You know, in my community, I could do this piece that would move us forward on that. Or you might be thinking, you know, bigger system-wide, what needs to happen as a region. Doesn't matter so long as you try to be as specific as possible. The third would be, what else do we need to know to be effective? And I'll put those three questions into the chat. And then we'll do a round of reporting. We're going to take 15 minutes for this first conversation, because this is probably the one that may require the most thinking and conversation. Does this make sense, what I'm asking you to do? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, great. So I will go back to this slide, and then I'll give you your minute, and then I'll take that down and we'll go into our breakout rooms. So just be thinking for a minute. Okay. That's my alarm going off. That was our minute. I will now put the three questions in the chat. Missy, are we ready for our breakouts?
Missy, you're muted.
We are getting there. Hang on one sec. I'm going to pause our.
Hello. Did you have a good conversation?
That was a very fast 15 minutes.
We
It was
got it
originally
done.
only going to be 10. So I think we've got 6 minutes before our mandatory get up and stretch break, which may be enough time to hear from one or two of our groups, but maybe not all of them. So Missy, since you did the assignments, you can back me up. I only know my first one. I know that Bailey took notes. So Bailey, would you mind sharing what the group that you were in discussed?
Absolutely. So 4 of us thought that number 1 was the most important. We really need to expand the workforce. It's capacity building. You can't do this without people. You need to consider the adult-child ratio for these facilities. And then one of us thought it should be really expanding employer-supported childcare. It's good business. They make a profit regardless. The costs are, you eliminate so many costs in recruitment and retention when you offer employer-supported childcare. It's a really big selling point. But most of us saw that you really need a viable workforce. We need to bolster up the early childhood profession to a livable wage, and also to show that there's other options besides just entry level for childcare, maybe through a flow chart or through personal stories of people who make a lot more than starting wage, to show that there's a lot of different points of entry, and also what you can achieve with early childhood.
Yeah, I think that's great. It seems like there would be like 3 big buckets of activity around this one. One was the approaches to actual recruitment. The second was the sort of like showing people that this can be a meaningful career. And then the third was funds, additional funds to support a living wage for workers. Is that how you remember it, or am I making that?
Yes.
Cool. And yes, one of our members was like, let's just get it going with employee, not that it's the only answer, but that there should be more employers in our region that are offering employer-sponsored childcare. And it seems like we have the knowledge and the resources in our collaborative to be able to support them. Cool, thank you so much, Bailey. We probably can hear from another group. Does anybody else want to go next?
I
I
could
can go next. Oh, we were in group 2. So we had 4 of us in our group, and we were all across the board. We had 1 that chose the first, 1 that chose the 4th, and 2 that chose number 2 as options. So we had a great discussion, and everybody, felt like all of it was really important. There was a lot of talk about budgeting kind of stuff for it, but supporting the parents with maybe some cohorts of parents that could go through the training together and support each other when we're talking about the workforce development piece. With the number 4, we talked about some cost modeling and what does it really cost as opposed to charging what families can pay kind of thing. So what is it, including everything, what is really the cost, and doing some wage parity pilots, really looking at what other folks are paying.
That all sounds really interesting, Debbie. What's the first thing you said? It was across something?
A wage parity pilot. So across other, folks that are doing similar work, what are other places paying?
Okay. So to establish what a living wage should be.
Should be, yep. So kind of like the first group talked about trying to help with that. And then we talked too about coaching instead of, so with the licensing and when the reviews happen, can it be more strength-based and be more coaching as opposed to did you dot every I and cross every T? That can be real intimidating and takes a lot of time. And is that really what's important for the kids?
I'm sorry to make you stop. Should the coaching be, are we saying we should be advocating for Lara to do that in their review, or as we support people with mentorship, that it should
I think
be
both.
based?
I think part of it was when they're there for licensing, if they can help with, be spending more time doing coaching as opposed to looking at every little white card to make sure everything's filled out exactly right. So that was kind of the example that was shared.
Okay.
But I think the coaching from all aspects, and then supporting the individuals also with their, if they're, with some of the kids that have behavior concerns, can we help support them to have kids staying in instead of being kicked out? can we look at some of the real benefits of doing this care? Can we say that they can take their kids with them for free? You know, when my daughter was trying to find a job, that was a big deal. She's a early childhood teacher, and she found a school that her kids could go for free and had guaranteed spots for early childhood. And so that helped her make the decision. So not just looking at some of those benefits and talking about the benefits of providing care.
That's great.
So those were our biggest thoughts.
Yeah, those are really, really good. All right, well, it's 10:54. I think we should take our break right now. We will be coming back at 11, 6 minutes. Feel free to turn your video off, or you're welcome to stay here. But if you stay here with your video on, we better see you stretching.
Jonathan, I'm so sorry. I see your face? Oh, all right, all right. Oh. Aren't you guys sweet? What up, Bibido?
We'll restart the recording of the meeting. Thanks, Missy. And Woody will turn it back over to you.
Okay, that sounds great. So were there other groups that would like to share what they discussed? We would love to hear from you.
There are 8 rooms altogether, just so you know.
We can share ours. So my group had 4 of us in it, and our main solution was solution 1. We did all think that all of them are intermingled and they all rely upon each other. However, for solution 1, if you don't have staff, you can't have a facilitation of childcare. So we did discuss where funding would come from for, that was our main question, is where would funding come from for this staffing? We know that they need higher wages, a living wage. We know benefits are needed. So how is that going to affect getting people in the door? Also,
So Brittany, did you discuss that as an open question, or did you have some ideas on where the money would come?
So we discussed it as an open question. We don't have any solutions on it. We were wondering, where is the funding for this, for the staffing going to come from? We know staffing is important, but how are we going to get that funding? How are we going to secure it? And how are we going to get them the benefits that they really need to keep them in the program? We don't want lots of turnover, because we see the damage that it does in the early childhood setting. So how are we going to get that funding? But we know that's important, right? We need a living wage, we need the benefits, all that kind of, all those wonderful things that are really required for us to function. And then also looking at how are we going to get them the training if they don't have trainings, like if they don't have the required education, how are we going to get them the education? So what incentives? Are we going to pay for their tuition? Are we going to reimburse? Are we going to set up our own program? How are we doing this? So that was another open question. We don't have the solution.
It's okay. Let's get to work. We'll get to work on solving those.
So lots of big questions that we had. And then how are we going to market and get these people into the roles? We have to advertise somehow. We have to make ourselves noticeable in the community. We know that staffing shortages are not just early childhood related, right? So how are we going to make us, draw these people into our roles that we need to fill? So that was kind of the majority of our big questions. We don't have the solutions for it, but we were wondering, how are we going to do this? We know this is really important. Without these people, we can't do this. We might have an empty building then. So.
Cool. Thanks so much, Brittany. Anybody else would like to share out what they discussed?
Woody, I'm happy to jump in. Brittany, it was like you were part of our group because we may have had a very similar discussion. Lots of just the opportunity to work on immediacy in making sure that we have the right bodies, really leading to more bodies means almost an instant change in capacity for licensed childcare and the consistency of childcare as well as the quality, and really a focus on how do we entice them forward into the field. And then we had a lot of conversation about the overlap. I think that we might have re-nested your categories a little bit. We spent some time talking about employee-based childcare, regional subpool opportunities to be able to support the potential either around legislation or some critical work in collaboration with one another. And lots, Brittany talked a little bit about recruitment of the right people for the right job. So all worthy endeavors, but I think the takeaway, Jess Anderson was loud on this one too. Without the people, it's really hard to make the work move forward. And I think there are some success strategies the region has used in the past, just not to scale, that we could implement with greater vigor. So I also think there's an opportunity for some degree of quick win in that capacity.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Who else?
I'll go ahead for breakout room 5. So initially, we had a difference of opinion of what was the most important. And ultimately, I believe we came down to unanimous idea that it wasn't so much about what was important, but what is the most urgent at this time. We had to think of a different way to look at it. So ultimately, we came down to number 2, because number 2 can lead to entrepreneurship of openings in new areas, but also if people aren't as interested as having home base, they can go into number 1 once they have that training. So for the immediate steps, we talked about like the potential of looking for who are the local professionals who could provide training / mentorship. Are there programs that are available in our areas to help with that process? And then for question 3, the process of identifying funding, which seems to be an across the board idea. And specifically for number 2, would we find that funding for in-home care specifically?
That's great. Thank you. Do we have another group that wants to share what they discussed?
We also focused on number 1 and the staffing, and in talking about staffing, we talked both about center and home based early care and education, and then one of the 4 members of our group was focusing on the hub and the importance of those services, and also of using existing resources to create that. But it came down to funding being crucial, and the need to help people understand and appreciate the value of the profession of early care and education, and what a tremendous contribution to society as a whole that is. And we can't continue to expect those people in that profession to subsidize the early care and education. And we also talked about that at this moment in time, early childhood has risen to the forefront in nationally and statewide and locally, and that we need to try to maximize that awareness and that consciousness that this is indeed of value to the entire community, and again talked about the interrelated of all of these pieces that they all support. But as someone else said before, without the staff, whether it's in a home base or center base, it doesn't exist.
Thank you, Marcia. Quick aside, one of the things that am finding exciting about this conversation is I think we as a group are acknowledging that a lot of these things are interrelated, but you're not coming back and saying we need to do all of this all at once. I mean, there is sort of a selective, these are the things that are going to have the greatest impact on our system. And the other thing that I really like is that even though there are some open questions, I think the areas where we need action are starting to kind of emerge from the conversation in terms of, finding several, probably multiple sources of funding, developing some advocacy approaches, taking some practices that are currently underway and leveraging them, an organized effort for recruitment, new information tools for people to see that this is a pathway that can be meaningful and rewarding. I think it's really exciting to hear about it. And so I don't mean to cut the conversation off. We have another group that talked about something different that should be added to the conversation at this point. Okay.
Well, Woody, I think.
Go ahead, Mary.
I think maybe group number 4 is the only group that hasn't reported out yet. And so I took notes on behalf of the 5 people who were in our group. And 4 of them identified expand the workforce as the top their top priority. And 1 that chose enhancing the ECL private provider. So we felt that they were pretty closely allied. So Brooke Lauren from TCAPS was in our group, and she talked about the career planning that begins in 7th grade. That's part of helping kids explore different ideas. And she suggested that as a practical step, one of the things that we could do is to begin helping that exploration process start very early. And that is going to actually help maybe build some of that regard and respect for the profession, because more people will be learning about it at an earlier time. So that was something that I really appreciated from many of the things that we talked about are the same that everyone else has shared. Someone else brought up, again, wages and compensation, and the idea that wages is more than just the hourly rate that someone's paid. It also goes to being able to access healthcare and paid time off and those kinds of things that people in other areas of education might be accessing, but early childhood folks aren't getting to them. And then the other thing that came up was housing, and how challenging it is for people who are just coming into a profession and are on the low end of the wage scale to access housing, and speculating on whether that is contributing to some of the shortage that we are experiencing. Lots of good stuff.
I'll say, no, that's fantastic. Okay, we've already gone well over our allotted agenda time. So there were two other things I wanted to do with you today. And maybe instead of doing one more round of breakouts, which is what we plan to do, we'll do this as a drop your thoughts in the chat, and then we'll have a group conversation. So the next thing related to metrics, and I already shared with you that the executive team of the Great Start Collaborative felt it was important for us to be able to say, what's our goal going to be, and how are we going to track progress toward this? So some of this stuff is fuzzy. I understand that, but let's at least give it a try. So I'm going to be sharing with you. It's pretty straightforward. So for the solution pathway, or the specific area that you feel like is most important for us to be moving forward with on a region, what are some things that we should be measuring as we think about where we are, as we think about our goals, and as we think about how we're going to make progress toward our goals? So my example was, if the goal is to create a living wage for all ACO workers, well, we need to know something like, what's the average and minimum hourly wage of all credential levels, within our early care and learning system. So I don't know how we're going to get that data, but I was thinking, well, that would be a good thing to measure, because then we could say, we want to create a goal of X for everyone. It's the baseline. We want our average to be higher than that. And then we have to be able to know where we are. We have to be able to mark our progress toward that. So whatever it is that you felt like was most important, you could drop in where you maybe already know where the data is available, but let's just kind of gather these ideas right now. And so does that make sense? So what I'm going to ask you to do is just write your idea down in the chat, and we'll do for this exercise and the next one, let's do it all simultaneously. So write your idea down. We'll give you a minute to think about it, but don't hit return yet, so that we can all go at the same time and you won't be influenced by other people. So if there's one thing that you feel like we should be measuring, tracking, or setting a goal, to move forward on that one piece of all of this that you felt was most important, go ahead and drop it in. And if you have no idea, you don't have to put it in, but let's try to challenge ourselves to think about this. It's because I'm a data guy. I'm just rattling them off. All right, let's 15 more seconds, and then we'll all hit return at the same time. There's already Laura's already shared her idea. Okay, well, let's go ahead and hit return, share your ideas. That's great. So we'll take all of this and put it all together into our action planning. And thank you very much for the thinking. All right, we're going to do one more, and then we'll move on to our next agenda item for the collaborative meeting. All right, so it's going to be a similar deal. We are about to review some next steps for creating work groups. So this was, one of the recommendations of the adjacency to carry this work forward is that we we had 4 work groups. They're all possible, and they relate to these 4 solution pathways. And I'll show you some visuals before we actually do this. There's been some discussion since then for a couple of reasons. One, because of the capacity of really trying to support this work, and more importantly, just how interrelated it is, that it might just be one work group, at least to begin with, that's going to take all of this input from the collaborative, identify people who are willing to put some time in to move this forward and start to really flesh out what the next steps are going to be and start to win the support from those in our community that we need support from to kind of make it happen. So I'm going to kind of work you through that structure. We'll review the RACIC model that we did in our last collaborative meeting. Some of you may not have been there, but that's okay. I'll walk you through it. And so what I'm going to be asking you to do is say who, and that could be a person or it could be an organization, would you want to serve as convener? Somebody who is going to be, helping to kind of bring this discussion, supported by the collaborative, supported by the consultants at the adjacency. They're not going to be on their own, but who really it makes sense to kind of lead this work. So that's one. That could be you. You can raise your hand and say, I'm the one that should be. And the second, what is your role? Maybe you feel like, and we'll go through the RACIC model, you just want to be informed of what's going on. Maybe you feel like you want to actively be involved in a work group to work on those issues that you just said were so critical to our system. Maybe you feel like you should be the one that should be responsible. So we'll go through all of that. But be thinking about that as we review this. So we're going to do this also as a drop it in the chat. The work groups would be, this is a little bit busy of a slide, but the point being that there are a number of things that we will be doing. The collaborative, supported by the adjacency, to support the work of this work group. So it's going to be well supported. We're going to be thinking about the meeting frequency. We're going to be thinking about different tools for sharing resources. We're going to be creating the metrics to track and move this forward. So I really want to emphasize there will be quite a bit of support in getting this work done. The RACIC model, and these are some of the specifics. So probably this is what we believe is going to happen. In the first quarter, what's going to happen is we're going to be recruiting one member of the Great Start Collaborative Service of a convener of at least one new work group. That could quickly split if we feel like we have the capacity to do that and need to get work done in different places, but at least one. Identify and invite work group participants from the collaborative and reaching out into other partners that have expressed interest in doing this work. Establish the goals and outcomes, meeting structure, project management tools, establish some communications resources, including naming, our media approach, a communications calendar, to support the work of this work group. We are going to be prioritizing quick start action items. Then there are going to be some ongoing meetings. I don't anticipate that this is an open-ended commitment that will last forever. We are really trying to get some things underway that will support our system and move it forward. We'll then be actively engaging with the community. We believe that there's an opportunity to create a funders circle of local foundations and organizations that are committed to investing in early childhood. Once they have a clear understanding of what our priorities are, what we're moving on, where they need to invest, I feel certain that we'll be able to accumulate those people, and then building additional supports and community resources for the work group and its activities. So this is what is going to happen going forward. And now you can think about, okay, who should be leading that as a convener for the collaborative, and what do I want my role to be? So RACIC, we covered this the last time. So responsible means being somebody who is directly responsible for delivering on the project or the task. So if somebody is going to be responsible for the work of this work group for the Great Start Collaborative, that's a pretty high bar. But I would love to have multiple people say, I'm willing to be directly responsible for moving this work forward. Accountable may not be as relevant here. It's more of the who's ultimately accountable for this work. We have two conveners of the collaborative. One is the United Way of Northwest Michigan. The other is Northwest Education Services. And at some level, they have accountability already for the work of the collaborative. Supporting is one that I would actively encourage you to consider. So if you believe that, as a participant in the work group, either you or your organization, you have a chance to support the implementation of all of the good things we just talked about, then think about that as a role for yourself or your organization. Being informed means you'd want to know what's going on and have at least the potential to provide input, although you may be less responsible for the close-in decision-making. And consulted means I have valuable knowledge. I want to share that knowledge. I don't need to be informed on an ongoing basis, but I do want the chance to share what my point of view is. So does that make sense? Have you sort of thought about what your role might be in a work group going forward to implement some of these things that we just talked about? Okay. So you're going to do this same way. You'll put it in the chat as soon as I stop sharing my screen, but don't hit return yet. And you're going to be putting two different things: convener, and you can do convener colon or convener dash or convener, and then the name of a person or organization that you think should be leading this work in your mind. And the second is what you think your role or the role of your organization should be. And I can go back to the RACIC model if you are not sure yet, so you can kind of think about what those roles are. But do you want to be responsible? Do you want to be supporting the work? Do you want to be informed, or do you want to be consulted? And that's what we're going to do. And then we'll finish up this work and we'll go on to the rest of the agenda. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So 30 to 45 seconds, unless you tell me you need more time than that. Convener, your role. Type it in the chat, but don't hit return just yet. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit return and enter your thoughts. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for the conversation today. This was excellent. I feel like we did exactly what we needed to do, which is to move from a good broad-based understanding of what will help the system to some action items that it's not that everything is crystal clear, but we know where we need to move next. I think we have what we need to be able to put this together into a plan and to work with our convener and our work group to give this some real momentum. So thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you, Woody, and thank you, the Adjacency, and thank you, all of the collaborative members who are here today for all of your good thinking. And there'll obviously be more opportunities for you to share input. And if you have any thoughts after this meeting, as you're reflecting on the work that we've done today, please be sure to either share them with me to pass on to the Adjacency or contact Woody directly. So otherwise, great job, everyone. We're going to shift gears a little bit now and talk about an opportunity that has emerged for some expansion of home visiting services, but they are specific to something that will be happening in Grand Traverse County. So I have a short PowerPoint that I'm going to show you, but I also at the same time want to tap Deb Aldridge Deb, could you let the collaborative know who you are?
Sure. I'm one of those folks that wears lots of different hats. I'm an assistant director at the Van Zeeland Health Department. I'm a nurse. I also coordinate the Healthy Futures program from Munson Healthcare, so the universal home visiting program that's available at no cost for any new moms or families in the area. And the other part of my role is as a co-coordinator for our local leadership group in this 10-county region. And so that was part of why this discussion that's upcoming. Did you want me to talk about it, Mary, or are you going to talk about it?
How about if I'll put up my my PowerPoint, Deb, if you want to go ahead and talk about it a little bit and how it wound up with the Great Star Collaborative, that'll be great. And I'll get busy sharing my screen.
Okay. So at the state level, there were some assessments done recently looking by county at different statistics to look for expansion of home visiting services. And they have offered to support financially and allow expansion for Grand Traverse County. So when they did this list of counties that had needs, Grand Traverse County was number 9 of 10 of the top 10 counties that were affected by this. And so they reached out to us, and the ask came to me as co-chair of the local leadership group that coordinates a lot of different evidence-based and non-evidence-based home visiting programs in our 10-county region, because the next step was we get to choose between, there were 3 different evidence-based choices that we could choose from to expand into Grand Traverse County. And there were a couple of different groups that could come together as a convener to pull together folks that provide services in Grand Traverse County and see what was going to be the best fit, which of the programs would be the best fit for our region. And so then Mary graciously, wonderfully, as part of the Great Star, took that role on and has hosted a couple of different meetings with stakeholders involved to look at the different models and see what we think might be the best fit for our area.
Thanks.
And this does specifically target families that are impacted by substance use. And so there's a couple different parts to it. One is a home visiting expansion, and we could choose Parents as Teachers, a program called Nurse Family Partnership, or another program called Healthy Families America or Healthy Families Northern Michigan. And then another piece of it will be to support a peer recovery coach to work side by side with folks in the program and with these families.
Great. I'm going to go through these slides really quickly. Deb, thanks so much for that overview. The background on this came from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and this is a slide deck that that they provided that I've modified a little bit for our use here today. So the background is that parental substance misuse is a factor in approximately 1 of 3 CPS cases that are confirmed for child maltreatment in Michigan. So that is certainly of concern to us. We know that based on our local county data, we have a little bit higher rates than are present across the rest of the state. So that has been something of concern for the collaborative for some time now. We know that substance use leads to higher risk factors for children. And we know that, that many families struggle to get the resources and the support that they need. One of the best ways that we can support families raising very young children is through our home visiting programs. And so one of the best things that when we look at the state, one of the best things that could happen is to increase access through additional slots and successful engagement of families. So MDHHS wrote a proposal for change in December of 2020 and received budget approval in September of 2021 and completed using different groups around the state, completed a needs assessment to determine and prioritize those counties with the highest risk for families. And we'll look a little bit later at some of the data that contributed to how Grand Traverse County was selected. As Deb mentioned, Grand Traverse County is in the top 10, and it was the funding is available to expand these services to 10 counties with the hope that eventually it will expand to additional counties in the state. So the project overview, we are being asked to help support a community-driven decision process and to identify which of these three potential models are might be the best model for us to use, and to make the decision about whether to expand home visiting using one of those models or to implement one of them as a new model in Grand Traverse County. The Peer Navigator pilot is that there is secured funding for, and it will be coming to Grand Traverse County. It is hoped that the Peer Navigator will be an individual who has lived experience and will be able to support families and help connect them to home visiting services and other community-based supports. The funding for this, as we understand it now, is relatively secure and sustainable. So it's been appropriated, and the intention is to support these expanded services in an ongoing way over the years. These are the required partners, and we have been reaching out to these partners. As Deb mentioned, we've had a couple of meetings so far that have included parents, and a number of these partners. We've been a little bit challenged to actually get our Head Start partner to one of the meetings. I'm glad Shannon is here today. I've had some sidebar conversations. Otherwise, everyone who is required as a partner has been involved. And the exploration and planning process was outlined by MDHHS, and we're kind of in the 3, 4, and 5 part right now of making some decisions. These are some of the data that were used to rank the counties. So on the left-hand side is a table that shows the indicators and their definition. That TEDS is, to look it up, treatment episode data set, which is a national data set that tracks admissions for substance use. And so that's something that I'm not particularly familiar with, but I know that our healthcare partners are. And the other metric that might be unfamiliar to some of you is the Gini coefficient, which is actually that measure of income inequality. So it looks at the differences, the magnitude of the difference between the number of people with very high income and the number of people with very low income. And we know in our region that that is, for many counties, a very real and challenging problem. And so these indicators were normalized and standardized, and this on the right-hand side, you see the table that shows how Grand Traverse County ranks compared to the other counties in the top 10. So as Deb mentioned, there are 3 models that are approved for this expansion. One of them is Healthy Families America. And I apologize for how small the type is, but that was the, when I pulled it off the table, that's of allowable programs. That's as big as I could make it. We are surrounded by counties that have HFA already. We've heard very good things about that program from our partners in those other counties and from families who have utilized those services. It is a fairly flexible program and seems to be able to meet the needs of lots of families. There are some program income guidelines, but they aren't as strict as some other programs. And this program does take into account risk factors when determining eligibility. It also, one of the things that it does is allows families to set up their own schedule for home visiting. So if it's not convenient for a home visitor to come every week, they can set up a schedule with their home visitor that does meet their needs. Nurse Family Partnership is a very highly regarded home visiting model. The thing that concerns us is that it is restricted to first-time mothers. And we know from looking at our data in Grand Traverse County and in surrounding counties that we need to be able to serve mothers who are not having their first child. So that one presents a little bit of a problem for us. And then the third one is parents as teachers. And that model is probably familiar to a lot of you because it's been widely used over the years in our region. It was the model that was used back in the days of Way to Grow. It currently is not really being used with pregnant families or with necessarily with new parents. And I need to do a little bit more discovery with our Head Start partners because they do, I believe, use it, but Shannon can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But we aren't sure that parents as teachers is necessarily a good fit for families who might need a lot of flexibility in how they arrange their home visiting models or their home visiting schedules. So these are the three models that are available for us to consider. And before we make a final recommendation to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, we wanted to get your initial thoughts as a collaborative. And to hear what questions you might have to get a sense of which of these three models you might recommend. And definitely to hear if you think that there are other people that we should be talking to. I will say that we're on a really short timeline. The state wants to hear back from us by February 3rd. So that's coming right up. But I'm happy to do additional outreach if you think that I'm missing someone. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now and turn it over to any of you who would like to ask any questions or share any thoughts about any of those home visiting models, or give me some ideas of other people that I might want to reach out to.
So my apologies, I missed part of this because I was getting my son off the bus. How are these families identified? Are they coming in as independent and they want to outreach, or is it a program that identifies these families as need?
Deb, do you want to explain how that works?
Sure. So I think there's no wrong door for how families are enrolled. I think they could come in, we have several different programs through the health department now that folks come in right now. It might be their physician recommends them. It might be they come in for delivery and have been identified with a perinatal use disorder. So it can be a self-referral. I think there's lots of different ways. So there would definitely be some outreach also in talking about the program and the benefits of it. But it's also voluntary for the families to participate.
Mary, I'm curious about the curriculum. So for Healthy Families America or Northern Michigan, I think typically they do choose parents as teachers. Would that be the thought here as well, or would there be a different curriculum explored?
I think that we could definitely look at that. No decision has been made yet. The basic, I think there's a difference between the model that we adopt and the curriculum that is chosen to go along with it. And I will say that one of the things that we like about Healthy Families America is that there are practitioners in our nearby counties that we could depend on for, advice and support in expanding that program into Grand Traverse County.
Mary, has anybody talked to Women's Resource Center or any of the shelters in outlying counties? Because a lot of times substance abuse and domestic violence go hand in hand. I have experienced that myself in past years, and I'm just wondering if they have been consulted. I'm sure they would be referring at some point, but what's their experience?
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, it is.
Wrote that down.
It's a great suggestion. I'm familiar with Parents as Teachers and it's somewhat Healthy Families America. I think, to be honest, I think either one would be a good choice. There's a little bit more of a focus on health in the Healthy Families, and that may be a better fit for substance abuse. I think both of them are pretty flexible in terms of number of visits, in terms of the program itself. And I do believe there's a pregnancy piece for both, but it's been a long time since I've actually been working with, parents as teachers and people working with parents as teachers. But those two in particular, I'm not sure if there's a huge difference, and I think it would be beneficial for us to look carefully about where we could have resources and support.
As far as the income requirement for Healthy Families America, what do we know about the thresholds for that?
Legal question.
It's flexible. Income is one of the factors that's looked at, and I don't know what the cutoff is offhand. But I do know that it takes into account additional risk factors, and substance use would be one of those factors that would automatically make a family eligible.
Parents as Teachers is universal.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right, Mary. I think with Healthy Families America, you can get around the income depending on risk factors.
That would be really important, I think, to parents. As we know, substance use really doesn't discriminate between incomes.
No, it does not.
Any other thoughts? Any other ideas about other people that we should reach out to? I really like that suggestion of going directly to the Women's Resource Center.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Yeah. And there obviously are other substance abuse programs that probably could be reached out to.
Right, ATS or any of the other ones in the area. But also maybe even going further than Women's Resource Center. I know when I was in the situation I was in 15 years ago, that there was no room for me at Women's Resource Center, and I had to go to Cadillac and I had to go to Grayling. Those were the two other facilities that could help me. So just kind of a thought it's a bigger thing than just Women's Resource Center.
Yeah, that's one of the, so right now, what's open for our consideration is only expansion into Grand Traverse County because of the way the state is ranking the counties. And the next nearest county on the list is Benzie, and they're 24th. So
One of the things to consider in terms of picking a model, Mary, and I wasn't sure, now parents as teachers, depending on your background, you know, what for Healthy Families America, I don't know, does it have to be an educator? Does it have to be, we need to be looking at the possibilities of having a variety of different people on a career pathway that is going to be viable for our region, and obviously to get the numbers of people that we want to be.
the Healthy Families America doesn't require a particular credential for their home visitors because it's being run out of, well, it is being run out of the health departments in our region. And so they're using all either nurses or social workers to do the home visiting.
Whereas parents as teachers doesn't require that.
So Jennifer Kearns, hi Jen, glad you could join us today, suggests that we also consider whether ACEs is a part of the home visiting model, or at least recognized in the home visiting model. I think that's a good point, and I don't know that it's explicit.
Well, certainly they both existed before ACEs.
Yeah.
So, but whether they've adopted that or not, I don't know. And it isn't that you couldn't use it as well.
Other thoughts? That's a good point, Clara, about the foster care system.
I also think that we need to make sure that we pull in our early intervention team in terms of understanding home visitation, as well as working with Early Head Start. Both the philosophy behind using families' routines and rituals as an important part of what we actually spend time working with, and giving parents the resources in support to be able to continue the work with their child after a home visitor has left.
It was a long time ago, but I was trained in all of the facets of parents as teachers education, and the training is very robust, and I'm sure it's even more advanced than it was in 1996, but it does give it is really clear as far as extensions of things that you can be doing with families after you leave. It really, I liked it at the time because it was you could have parent handouts that were at different reading levels and comprehension levels. And it does take into account your family's culture, and it supports, it had supported it at any level, when you were going into the home. So it's just my experience with that. But more to talk about with Cheryl, I feel like that is a curriculum that it's an extensive training to become PhD certified.
Yeah, been there, done that. Yeah, but it's absolutely possible. And I'm not sure what training is required for Healthy Families America. I'm assuming it's very similar.
Yeah, I believe that's got a pretty intensive training also. And there's a lot of reporting and quality improvement cycles and things that go with it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has come up is that parents as teachers struggled for a while, and I don't know if it's still true, but struggled for a while with the program being used without fidelity.
Right.
They've tightened up their requirements for training and reporting.
Right.
They have, and they do have a complete fidelity checklist as well.
So I think we could feel really confident if if that was the model that was selected, that that the region that in Grand Traverse County we'd be able to support it with fidelity. And I think the same is true with Healthy Families America. Also significant reporting and requirement and fidelity oversight. Shannon, do you interact with both of those programs then?
So Healthy Families Northern Michigan, we definitely do have interactions with them, which is really nice. And then Parents as Teachers, I'm not sure who's using that. We use the Parents as Teachers curriculum. We're not a Parents as Teachers program, but like I said, I do know that Healthy Families Northern Michigan has also been using the Parents as Teachers curriculum. So you would have, then the responsibilities of fidelity to that curriculum plus Healthy Families Northern Michigan.
So I thought Early Head Start did use Parents as Teachers for the curriculum.
We do, but we're not a Parents as Teachers program. So we're an Early Head Start program who uses the Parents as Teachers curriculum. So there's just different, checks that you have to hit to be one or the other.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Early Head Start has more regulations and than Parents as Teachers in terms of what they have to do. So it's actually you can partly do Parents as Teachers, but Early Head Start's got more. They have to be true to their performance standards.
Well, this has been a really helpful conversation for me, and I think for Deb as well, to get your input and to hear some of your thoughts on this, on making this decision. We're have another large group of folks that we'll be meeting with next Monday, the regional perinatal collaborative, which is a 21 county group. All gather input from them, and then our task force work will make a final recommendation at the end of the day next Monday. So I may be reaching out to some of you between now and then to get a little more of your thinking before we make this final decision. Do you have any final words, Deb, to share with the collaborative about this?
No, I think it's great. I think it was really fast turnaround time, which made it challenging to, maybe do as much in depth as we'd like to, but it feels really good that it's between the two choices. And I think either one could work. So.
And I did want to say one last thing. I'm thinking of reflective practice and infant mental health, that needs to be considered.
I think that's a requirement of Healthy Families. It's a requirement. I don't know about Parents as Teachers.
It isn't in Parents as Teachers, but I think it's a super important component.
Thanks for bringing that.
Staff and infant mental health practice.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for adding that. Okay. Anything else on this topic before we wrap it up for the day? Well, thanks so much for your input. Seth, I don't see Seth, so I think he didn't make it here. So, and it looks like Yvonne is gone. So I guess we'll have to pick somebody to close us out today. Were you raising your hand, Cheryl? No. You're muted. You're still muted.
I said I don't have a goodbye song in my repertoire. I could think of a song. I mean, but I can't think of one that has goodbye in it. I have a reading song. I have a hello song. Sorry. I literally, we could do a reading song. All right. So if you have glasses on, you can use those, but then otherwise you have to have your pretend glasses. Okay, get ready. All right. These are my glasses. This is my book. I put on my glasses and open up my book. And I read, read, read. And I look, look, look. I take off my glasses and close up the book.
All right, thank you.
We're done.
Woody, you unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, just thank you.
Okay, well, it's 11:56. I think we're out of here.
Yes, the Great Start Parents Meeting will convene at 12:15. So those of you who are going to stand for that, go stretch and eat, and we'll see you on the other link soon.
Well, and the rest of you get, the 5-minute stretch at the end of the hour. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.